My name is Inez Milholland, and I was a lawyer and a suffragette. I was born in an upper-class family in New York in 1886. We were rich due to my father's work, but still a highly progressively minded family. My sister and I were expected to attend college, and I did my bachelor's degree at Vassar's in graduating in 1909.
Other than your courses, what did you do at Vassar?
Before going to college, I met Elizabeth Pankhurst on a trip to London, where she made me realize how far American suffragettes were behind British ones in the public view. I was very determined to change this, state of affairs at Vassar, but we weren't allowed to talk about suffrage on campus. And after a few protests, I decided to comply with this by holding meetings in the cemetery across the street. It was off campus, so the administration wasn't allowed to complain. I was also on the debate team, which helped my careers as a lawyer and as a public speaker tremendously.
Now, after graduating, you went on to law school, but you had issues there too.
Yes. I applied to Yale, Harvard, and Cambridge universities, all of whom rejected me. Harvard explicitly because I was a woman. I did, however, get accepted into the New York University School of Law in late 1909, graduating in 1912.
What was it like being a female lawyer in an almost exclusively male field?
After passing the bar, I practiced criminal and divorce law. It was very difficult to practice criminal law as a woman because there was a strong social stigma against criminals of any kind interacting with women, even their own attorneys. This made my work on prison reform incredibly difficult, as I'm sure you can imagine.
I can imagine. I guess they didn't want to offend your delicate sensibilities.
I'm sure.
Now, you are well known for leading the 1913 women's suffrage procession. What can you tell us about that?
So, Alice Paul and Lucy Burns did most of the organization of the parade, and we decided that I should be the face of it because I was photogenic and well known as a socialite at the time. I was dressed all in white with a cape and a crown, and I rode a gray horse down the front of the procession. We were not going for subtlety with our liveries. We also chose to arrange the procession to go down the inaugural route Woodrow Wilson would be taking the next day in order to get maximum attention on our parade, and it worked. A lot of the attention was admittedly negative, and the police were very unhelpful with corralling counter-protesters, but overall, it was a successful parade and it did a lot of attention to the cause.
Now, besides women's suffrage, you were involved with many other causes of the time. What were some of those causes?
I was a large proponent of labor rights for both adults and children, to the point where I would physically go to strikes myself, even being arrested a few times, and would use my family's wealth to bail out strikers. I would be heavily interested in equal rights for African Americans, as well as prison reform. I was also a socialist and a pacifist. I believed that world peace was possible and was against World War I.
How did your friends and family feel about your work, and how did the public feel about your work?
Focusing just on suffrage, my family was entirely supportive of my efforts and my work. I didn't meet my husband Eugene until the July after the 1913 parade, so he was always a strong supporter of my work. As for the public, one of my jobs as a leader of the movement was to be a sort of a bright young face of the movement, so that when detractors groused about how suffragettes were all bitter old spinsters who couldn't find a man, I could smile in front of a camera and stand on a podium and give a speech about the importance of rights for women while being young and a suffragette and married.
Now, what happened to your work after the 1913 parade?
After the procession, I continued with my career as a lawyer and went on speaking campaigns around the nation to states that had not yet ratified women's right to vote, telling them to do so. It was at this time that my health started failing, but I continued touring and speaking nonetheless. I was not going to stop until all states had either individually ratified women's right to vote or the federal government had done so.
That's a very worthy cause. Now, you are remembered for your final words. Tell us how they came about.
By 1916, my health had gotten quite poor, but I was still doing a circuit. On October 23rd, I was in Los Angeles, California, giving a speech urging women to fight for the right to vote, and until then, to get men to vote out Woodrow Wilson's conservative Democratic Party, when I collapsed on stage. My last public words were, "Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty?"